Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Burrows. I'm one of our marketing coordinators here at Kids and Company. Welcome back for another Kidco Talk. Thank you for joining us today. I wanted to welcome our speaker, Blair Wexler-Singer, BSc, MSW, RSW. Blair is a social worker and psychotherapist registered in the provinces of Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia, practicing in the field of reproductive counseling. She has a certificate in perinatal grief and loss and has over 17 years experience working extensively with people who have endured trauma, grief and loss, addiction, mental illness, and attachment challenges. Hello and welcome to Kidco Talks. Today, Blair will explore two often overlooked experiences, the unique challenges of parenting after infertility and the emotional toll of secondary infertility. Participants, we will have the Q&A function open today. So if you, throughout the talk, have any questions for Blair, please write them there. It is completely anonymous. And at the end of the talk today, we will try and get to all of your questions. So Blair, over to you.
Hi, everyone. So lovely to be here today. Thank you, Emily, for the invitation. And I'm so excited to be speaking to all of you about a topic that's very close to my heart. So without further ado, I'm going to just start the slideshow. All right, hopefully we're good to go. So as Emily had introduced, this is a topic, again, about IVF to parenthood, and that will include both primary and secondary infertility, and we'll really go into some deep dive conversations today about both. And I will go and just flip over my slide about me because Emily had generously just covered that. I will just say I will be talking a little bit later on about some of the additional supports that are available, especially around secondary infertility, including support groups and individual counseling. So I will come back to that before the end of the session today. But here are some of the things that we will be covering in our hour together. So today we're going to be talking about a combination of different things, understanding the emotional landscape of parents who have either conceived through infertility, donation, treatment, surrogacy, or are currently struggling to conceive again to grow their families further. We're going to go over and recognize the signs of what an ongoing adjustment looks like after infertility, including some common impacts from both, again, primary and secondary infertility, and how they have impacts on early parenthood. We're going to go and talk a little bit more for parents specifically about practical and important coping strategies to go and manage specifically, again, secondary infertility, especially when interacting in the daycare environment. For educators, we're also going to have a little bit of an information session about the evaluation and advocacy that can happen within the classroom about activities and materials that can be able to really represent all families and be inclusive. And then lastly, we're going to highlight the incredible organization of Fertility Friends Foundation. Fertility Friends Foundation, whose mission is to help make fertility care support accessible for all. All right, so why is this topic important? So in order to really understand what that question entails, let's first understand what infertility is and is not. So infertility is a medical condition which is defined by the difficulty of getting pregnant or carrying a pregnancy to term after trying for some time. So that's usually around 12 months of regular unprotected sex or 6 months if over the age of 35. It can happen to anyone. So again, you can be from any socioeconomic background, you could be from any type of race or religion. This is really an unlimited amount of kind of impact this can have on any type of individual. It affects people, again, all genders, sexual orientations, and even family structures. It can often be quite complex and have both medical, genetic, hormonal, and sometimes even unexplained causes. So if you see in this little graph here, when it says causes of infertility, especially in Canada, you can see there's really a third of a breakdown for each. It's really not a homogeneous type of diagnosis. It's also often a shared challenge. So as just mentioned, it's not only considered a female issue, about 1/3 of all cases can be related to female factor, but also a third male factor and another in terms of the combination of unexplained or a combo of both male and female. So what isn't infertility? It is not a reflection of someone's worth. effort, or lifestyle choices. It doesn't mean that someone didn't try hard enough or waited too long. It is not always permanent. So many in this space will understand that people who have struggled with infertility still may go on to have children, and many actually do. It's more about understanding the impacts of what that entails as well. It's also not only about the pregnancy. So it's also about loss of identity, and reimagining how a family can be created. And most often than not, it is not something that's visible. So often you can't tell who is experiencing it. It's a very private pain that many feel and experience silently. So what's the prevalence in Canada specifically? So believe it or not, 1 in 6 Canadians experience infertility. That's as common as breast cancer and even more common than type 2 diabetes. Rates of infertility have gone up 50% in the last 50 years. And just for context as well, just because of where we're coming off of in the last 20 plus years, it is recorded as of 2023 that we had the lowest fertility rates in the last 20 years. So this is again like an important reflection for us to understand as people, not just as parents, but also in the education space about what that prevalence is on the day-to-day within our own country. So I know I've been talking a little bit more about primary and secondary. So what are the differences and what does that mean? So primary infertility is, again, the inability to conceive a pregnancy for at least 1 year of regular unprotected intercourse. And secondary infertility is the inability to become pregnant or carry a baby to term after previously having had at least one successful pregnancy. So the truth is, while there is a lack of Canadian data on the prevalence of primary versus secondary infertility in our country, global estimates actually suggest that secondary infertility tends to be much more common than primary in many populations. And for example, one global analysis reported that around 2% of women globally will be experiencing primary, while 10.5% experience secondary. So again, this is really important to know. And while these aren't stats for Canada particularly, this is about trends and understanding how this can impact, especially in these spaces. Okay, so I'm assuming that many here today are either parents, educators, supervisors, or staff. And so the focus will really about how infertility specifically impacts parenthood, especially in the early years. It's important to recognize that there are many different paths to parenthood. Not every family's journey was straightforward or private. Often, many involved medical, emotional, or legal challenges before welcoming their child. In fact, within the community of Kids & Co., it's very common for parents to have used IVF, donor conception, surrogacy, adoption, and other collaborative family means to be able to go and build their families. Each of these journeys involves immense courage, resilience, and often years of planning, loss, and hope. So these experiences don't just end with birth or at the arrival of a child. They often continue to shape as early parenthood starts. Parents may have heightened emotions, lingering anxiety, or unique sensitivities around the topic, like pregnancy announcements, natural conceptions or stories, or family building conversations in general. So, as early educators, understanding this background definitely helps bring more empathy to the everyday interactions, and small things like language and how milestones are celebrated can definitely make a big difference for all families. So on the coming slides, we're going to go into a bit of a deeper dive into how infertility presents, how to cope, especially as parents. And then we're going to discuss again some more practical ways of being inclusive and supportive in the classroom and community spaces. Okay, so let's start talking about infertility as a whole, both in the primary and secondary, and how, again, this can kind of play out in a person's individual experience. So you can see from this slide, there's a long list of the impacts that fertility or recurrent loss can have. And believe it or not, several studies, including those from Harvard Medical School, the Mayo Clinic, and even the WHO, have found that the psychological distress experienced by individuals diagnosed with infertility are on par with the patients facing chronic illness, such as cancer, heart disease, or HIV. This doesn't mean, though, that infertility is medically life-threatening, but emotionally and socially, it could definitely mean that it could have the same life-altering effects and impacts. So rates of clinical depression are typically higher for those undergoing fertility treatments and repeated loss. It could lead to complicated grief hopelessness and identity changes, especially for those who are experiencing secondary infertility. The idea of like, I thought I'd be a parent of 2 children by now, a lot of those types of thoughts tend to come in and really change a person's identity. It could also lead to social withdrawal, especially in settings centered around children. And there's an increased risk of marital tension that can happen at times. And also, it could also bring people closer together, especially if they're feeling more isolated from peer support groups or peer supports, I should say. Post-birth can also be a huge adjustment, and postpartum is notably higher in those who have undergone any type of infertility. So keeping that in mind, how can that play out in daycare settings? How could that play out in community? So some of the things that we will be focusing on today are about how the long list of those impacts that we had just covered in the previous slide can be observed, and also how to go and mitigate some of that. So, as we've discussed, many families have spent years planning for a child, and even after the success of infertility, it could leave a lot of emotional residue. So, it could lead to heightened protectiveness. And so, parents who have or may experience losses or multiple treatment cycles or years of uncertainty can really feel that much more vigilant when it comes to what's happening with their child, especially in the daycare setting. So as for parents, some quick tips are allow for those feelings to be. Again, like I'm a big believer in not rushing through emotions. Sometimes it's about leaning into those feelings versus pushing them away. What I would say though is if feelings are lingering and it's really interfering with the protectiveness over a child, that might be a signal that there's some lingering trauma that could be beneficial to go and speak with or join a support group over. As educators, that might kind of come to you as a parent being extra cautious or meticulous with routines, with separation. And instead of using that to kind of feel like a parent is overreacting and be very judgmental over that, this is a nice way of understanding that this is probably the tail end of a trauma from years of them trying, and to have a little bit of more of a compassionate lens instead of point. Another big area of how this can play out is feelings of guilt and pressure. So parents can feel a range of emotions, both from gratitude, but also feeling a lot of guilt for wanting another child, shame about it being difficult to have conceived or to conceive further. And I often hear from parents specifically who are experiencing secondary infertility, statements like, I shouldn't complain, I should be grateful for what I have. I wanted this baby for so long. I really need to kind of just, trudge through. Those are things and feelings that, are definitely a lot related to stigma and guilt and fear about what's next and upcoming, but it could also play in a lot in terms of a parent's ability to kind of be patient and give attention to the child in front of them. With that, I would say parents are commonly struggling between the grief that they're experiencing and also being, the happy parent that they want to be for the child that does exist. So a quick tip for parents right now is try to release feelings of having to do like make up for parenting. Understanding that you don't have to be perfect, that being present is what your child is going to see first and foremost in that moment. And there are other avenues, whether it's connecting with partner or, others in the fertility community to go and support through those feelings as well. As educators, as we had mentioned, making space for both of the gratitude that can happen as well as the grief. And again, not judging parents if they are a little bit more withdrawn from participation or activities, because it's likely that they're struggling with multiple emotions at the same time. Sensitivity around family size. So, there can often be very triggering conversations that happens with peers about multiple children and who are expecting again, or who just had another baby. Those things can be very triggering and uncomfortable for people who've gone through infertility and who are experiencing secondary infertility. So as parents, this is a good reminder to be mindful of these comparisons. It's easy to compare to parents who either conceived easily or who have more than one child. However, focusing on your own child and your own unique journey can really feel validating and more compassionate. As educators, this is a nice reminder to try to avoid planning social parenting events that could lead to more isolation for certain families. So again, we're going to talk about some of those tips later on, but it's a good understanding too that as both parents going through this and as educators, there are lots of different ways to kind of incorporate some of these things, knowing that these are likely to be underbellies for a lot of the feelings that people are coming into the centers with. Another one I would say is just, oh, I lost my slide, sorry, being sensitive to milestones, pardon me. Parents might especially be alert to developmental milestones. They may struggle to trust that their child is safe in certain environments, or they might even feel disconnected when the experience doesn't match their expectations. So a lot of shoulds can exist here too, that they should be more involved, that they should be kind of doing things in a certain way. This is a good step back point for parents to just notice what triggers they might have about certain milestones. This is a nice opportunity to kind of plan in advance if you know that there are events that are happening so that you can proactively figure out a way to cope, either decline or kind of step away as needed during those milestone events. As educators too, this is a great way to, again, avoid judgment of parents who might not attend all things for their kids. So a little bit more about tips for coping, and this is really geared towards parents, but I think again, as educators, this is a really nice opportunity to just hear a little bit more about some of these tangible things that can be done to kind of help ride through some of these really tough emotions. So there's often a very big stigma, especially with secondary infertility, because society often assumes that infertility only affects those trying for a first child. Secondary infertility can absolutely be invisible, as we had noted, and under discussed. So programs like this are so wonderful, and I'm so again grateful for Kids & Co for proactively taking this opportunity to really have a workshop like this. But leaving parents feeling isolated and alone, specifically amongst peers, is a big part of, again, what is the kind of ripple effect of secondary infertility too. So some self-care tips that really can be useful to keep in mind. So the first is leaning into some of these feelings. And so I often go and describe an analogy. Many of us grew up with this as like a party gift when we were kids in a loot bag where you have a bit of a finger trap. And if you recall, when you stick your fingers in towards the, the little, toy, that the tendency was to try to pull outward and remove your fingers. And really, in fact, that just grabbed harder. The hack to that toy was to kind of push forward and to lean in. And that's the same idea with these feelings, where as much as we want to resist and push them away, actually validating them and acknowledging that they are there because of the pain and the grief or the fears, that's something to, again, give recognition to. And so part of this is actually naming to tame, naming what the feeling is, allowing that to kind of be, and not judging yourself for having these feelings in the first place. Another thing is kind of releasing these shoulds, as in, there's really no right way to feel. And most of the shoulds are actually based in self-judgment, shame, grief, and even fear. So kind of refocusing a little bit more and being present focused, focusing on facts and not only the fears, can also help a lot of the time ground in the here and the now. And could also allow to dismiss some of those feelings where the self-judgment kind of takes over. Another big thing is communicating openly with a partner if you have a partner, or communicating with, those who are closest to you about what those fears and hopes and frustrations might be. Taking blame out of it can also be a big, big challenge, but again, a very important step to being able to normalize. Recognizing that if you do have a partner, people can cope differently. And this is not kind of like who's experiencing it worst. This is a nice reminder that this is a team effort to go and start and grow a family, and a team effort to go and raise a child. And so as a result, most of the time, the validation could be very important in just grounding you and understanding that you're not in it on your own, that this is something that can be experienced as a together, and leaning into those together supports to be able to go and get that validation and move forward with some of that healing. Another one is setting boundaries in social spaces. So a really important tip to kind of navigate this, especially within the daycare community, is setting boundaries. So it's okay to skip triggering conversations or events. This is a nice opportunity that if and should you know that there is something taking place at the program where it will elicit some feelings, let the providers know, let the caregivers know. This is appropriate, that if there are certain topics that are very sensitive, that this is proactively kind of discussed and anticipated so that you are able to go and have a little bit more control over those situations when the infertility itself is often feeling like a lack of control. Being present and focused in the moment, as we've noted before, can be a really useful way of going and letting the facts guide. Often bringing in facts of this moment and being present focused can allow people to kind of taper some of those what ifs and allow people to really be in the moment with where they're at right now, not just for themselves, but again, with their children. Asking for what you need is also a big one, but I would say this is where, again, it could be incredibly hard to go and identify what a need is in the first place. So, the first step into this would actually be like identifying what the actual need is. This is often a situation where there's no fix it, and many parents often feel like they're not able to like pinpoint what their need is because it just feels so overwhelming. It could be about little needs. It could be about, again, just communicating something really small to staff or to partner or to those closest about what would allow them to feel a little bit more, again, present focused. It could be allowing for breaks when needed and leaning on supports and asking for help, which can be really difficult as well. So those types of things I would say are the hardest part, which is identifying the need. And then the second part is actually being able to communicate those needs to the people closest to you. So those are some quick things to, again, just think about in terms of what could help in terms of the coping of secondary infertility. The last is understanding too that you're not alone in this and that there are definitely supports available. So supports could look like talking to a counselor, it could be journaling, and it could be also joining a secondary infertility support group. So connecting with others who also understand that complexity of parenting while going through grief, loss, treatments, and really understanding the overwhelm of what that could be can be very meaningful to go and connect with others who have those shared experiences and relatability. So just for understanding knowledge, there are many support groups that are available across the country. Fertility Matters, which is a website that has a number of groups listed there, can go and guide depending on the province that you're in, as well as I offer as well a specific group geared towards secondary infertility, which is online and accessible to anyone who is struggling to grow their family further after having a child as well. So just understanding too that these supports exist should and if you need can feel way less isolating and really feel like there's an opportunity to talk out some of these deep feelings in a way that's in a supportive and brave environment. So in terms of the educator takeaways, some ways that educators can help support families experiencing secondary infertility can be about just being reflective about personal language habits and biases. So using inclusive language with all families will help affirm diverse family structures, avoid feelings of otherness, and support every child's sense of belonging, no matter what their family structure is. We mentioned a little bit earlier too about evaluating classroom activities for inclusivity. So that could be being thoughtful about sibling themed projects or baby related topics. It could be reevaluating what family tree activities or holiday celebrations look like. It could be about offering some alternatives to some of those activities too. So rethinking what that could look like to really encompass all families and how they can see themselves in the resources, books, and program materials that daycares can offer. Highlighting storybooks and visuals that really represent diverse families can also be really useful. Having bookshelves filled with books that are not only about heteronormative family structures can be useful to really show children that kids come and families happen in all different shapes and sizes and in different constellations. Another one is kind of using additional sensitivity when announcing baby or new sibling announcements. So this can be a very big trigger for many experiencing secondary infertility, or even for those who've gone through primary infertility. So new pregnancy announcements or baby announcements can really trigger feelings of grief and sadness. And parents may feel very happy for others, but really heartbroken for themselves. And so making sure to announce new additions thoughtfully when possible, even sharing news privately if you're aware of a family's personal struggle, and avoid phrases that can be really insensitive, like "you're next" or "it's time for another for you." Practicing empathetic curiosity. So this is really when interacting with parents and children, more so asking open-ended questions, non-assumptive assumptive questions that welcome rather than, make it feel really like otherhoods for families who've taken different pathways to parenthood. And then lastly, I would say recognizing the emotional after effects. So, just as we had highlighted before about some of the other slides about the impacts that infertility can have, really having that front and center to really break down some of what those heightened awareness and hyperprotectiveness could look like, what those anxieties or where those anxieties can come from, offer gentle reassurance and consistency. And, again, there's no expectation that there's going to be a fix from, at least the educator's perspective, but just, recognizing that those feelings come from a place of lived experience, often trauma, as well as love, can really go a long way. So, we've covered a lot in a short amount of time just about how infertility shapes, early parenting experiences, from strategies on how to cope with some secondary infertility, as well as, how to support in the daycare environment, and how small, but meaningful little shifts in language and classroom practices can really help foster inclusivity and trust. I think some really important guiding principles in general are about, that families are really built in many different ways. Children, either in your care or in your families, have come, through different ways of coming into this world. So either through natural conception, whether through IVF, surrogacy, adoption, donor conception, or through, a blend of different family structures. Every family, though, deserves, equal space and respect. And so I think, that could be a guiding principle for sure for the guiding ways of, being inclusive of all families. Language also, again, can shape what belonging feels like. And that's not just for children, but parents who are part of programs as well, and give signals that, again, this is an inclusive space where they can belong. Small adjustments in programming, as we had said, could really make a big difference in how people feel welcome. And so, again, just revisiting what activities could look like, phrasing of newsletters, and what's on the bookshelf can really make powerful ways of feeling, again, like there is a community that is not just under one vision or one kind of set of how family is made and sustained. And then using empathy and curiosity. So if you're ever unsure of what to say, lead with curiosity and kindness. You don't have to know how to answer things. You don't need to know how to have the perfect language, but it's also nice to understand that there can be ways of asking parents in a sensitive way, or approaching things with just more mindful care, so that it could feel, again, like the curiosity is coming from a place of um, genuine kindness as opposed to being judgmental. So for educators participating here today, there is a beautiful role of having an impact, not just on the children that you're working with, but also on the parent body. Giving gestures where inclusion is paramount could really help children grow, knowing that families in all their forms are and can be celebrated. And for the courageous families that have joined today and the parents who are with us, I want to leave you with this: that your journey matters, your feelings are validated, you're not alone here. And whether your family grows in the way you hope or not, the love you give and the bond that you share with your child is what truly is what's going to define your family. So with that said, I want to just highlight an incredible organization, Fertility Friends Foundation, who is a Canadian charity since 2021 with the mission of making fertility care more accessible for all. They provide grants to help cover the exorbitant costs of assisted reproductive technologies, including IVF, egg and sperm donation, surrogacy as well. It's a huge financial burden to people who are trying to start and grow their families. And so this is an unbelievable way of being able to help continue that unbelievable story for people to grow and start their families. So just understanding the impact, as we had said, like this can have a hand for 1 in 6, especially in Canada. The costs alone of what IVF entail can go upwards of $25,000 per cycle. And surrogacy in Canada can cost anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 per, again, surrogacy arrangement. 55% of IVF and 75% of surrogacy journeys are privately or self-funded. So again, you can understand the financial impacts on top of everything else that we've discussed this morning or this afternoon about the impacts that fertility and infertility can have on an individual and couple. So that being said, the cost of continuing treatment, the cost of paying for medications, the cost of pursuing this dream can be a huge emotional, not just financial stress. And so that's why Fertility Friends Foundation has been founded to really ease some of that. So they have so far unbelievably offered over 70 grants across the country. That is close to over $350,000, pardon me, in grant money awarded. They have so far been able to help over 20 babies be born, and more are on the way. They work with at least 50 partners nationwide and over 20 different fertility expert partners as well. So there's an unbelievable campaign that's currently going on, and that's 24 hours to build dreams. It's taking place the end of this week, so Thursday the 13th to Friday the 14th, where any of the money that you're going and contributing will be doubled. So every dollar you are donating is matched with the generous partners that have been helping. And this can help fund another 9 fertility grants coming up in this term. So this is an unbelievable opportunity again to play a role in helping other families build their dreams. You can use the scan code here under the barcode, as well as visit the Fertility Friends Foundation website. And there are wonderful opportunities to stay connected and get involved. There are event updates where there are things that happen throughout the year as well. And it's about keeping the movement going. It's about spreading the word and helping to understand this vast impact that infertility can have on not just the families in the Kids & Co network, but also globally. So with that being said, I'm going to open the floor to have some questions. And here's some contact information too for anyone who might be interested in the support groups that we run at Informed Fertility, as well as just understanding a little bit more about the resources that are available to anyone who is interested in learning a little bit more in depth about how to navigate this pathway.
Thank you so much, Blair, and thank you for such a wonderful talk. We have some questions that I can read out to you now. And if any of you are thinking of questions as well, please leave them in the Q&A and we'll try our best to get to them. Our first question here is, as a friend, how can I be more supportive of a close couple to me navigating IVF?
That's such an excellent question. And I think that often many people don't know what to say that's not going to pour salt on the wound. And a lot of the time it's just about, giving space. So I would say the first and most important thing to lead with is just offering to be a listening ear. This is where saying things like, oh, don't worry, it will work out, or you were pregnant before, you will be pregnant again. Those are things to avoid, but definitely just being someone who's leading with that care and compassion to say like, I know this has been a really tough road. I'm here to listen. If there are things that you need me to do, and especially if they have a little one, offering to go and have some time with them so that if they are going to treatments or if they're navigating losses, that that's something that you can open the space for. I think, even going back to what I was talking about before, which was helping someone even just identify the need could be really useful. So just saying like, do you want me to bring you a meal? Do you want some help with childcare? Do you want to go for a walk? Just creating opportunities with openness is definitely the way to go. And I think as a friend, that's just a beautiful way of being able to provide space, not fixing.
Thank you for that response. Here we have, how can I answer questions from family members such as grandparents and my partner's side of the family who do not know about our struggles, asking when we will have another baby?
Yeah, that's definitely one that comes up often. I would say often the journey is very private and there's no right or wrong here. I think many people often feel like this is something that they want to be very public over and they'll go and they'll be blogging and very outward. And then I meet with many, many people who are feeling the depth of the struggle and really want to be private and not be disclosing. So when it comes to family or friends, really understanding how those comments, usually well-intended but very insensitive, can be responded to. So the first thing that I would say are having something that I like to call a PR statement. So if you know or anticipate that certain people in your life will be throwing these questions out to you, plan in advance for how you feel like you're going to want to respond. So I like to say again, having one or two PR statements available, and it depends. Like speaking to someone who's a parent or grandparent might be really different than someone in your larger circle. So, having a few kind of on hand could be useful. Some people use humor, so it depends. Again, you kind of have to read the room. Like sometimes people will be like, well, I'll know as soon as you know, or you'll know as soon as I know, kind of thing. And some people usually say too, like, it's been a bit of a difficult journey. I don't really want to talk about it. Other people will go and say, like, we're just taking it one day at a time. Some people even say too, like, we're just enjoying the time with our little one right now. There are lots of different ways about going about it, but I would say having a few already practiced and rehearsed statements could really take the pressure off and let you feel less like you're on the spot and more in control of that narrative. I will again reiterate, there is no need to go and disclose anything that doesn't feel right to go and disclose, but going and sharing little bits can actually sometimes be a little bit useful. So if people do know in advance that there is um, a struggle taking place, whether it's again, like we've been trying and we're now seeking some medical supports. We don't feel like talking about it, but we appreciate your curiosity. That is also sometimes a way of kind of sharing a little bit of vulnerability, but nipping it where you feel the limit and the boundary is needed.
Thank you for that. Here we have a question that is in a similar breath, but with a different perspective, saying suggestions for when your child cries and complains about not having a sibling. It is heartbreaking when we've tried for so long.
Yeah, and I would say, often what we've been talking about is really about the adult lens, but I didn't actually mention as much as like what that experience could be like for a child. And when they see peers going through different family milestones, let's say welcoming a sibling, it could kind of circle back to understand what that experience could be like for your own child. So I would say in this case, teaching your child to lean into those feelings, validate those feelings, say it must be so hard that you want to have a sibling and that hasn't happened right now or as of yet. Um, Books can be a fantastic tool, again, depending on when the children are asking this question. There are a number of books, and I'm happy to share that through Emily after this presentation, of some great books that really talk about different family dynamics. Again, this is a wonderful opportunity to expand bookshelves with these resources that talk about single child families. It also talks about different families and how they kind of come to be, to help, again, just give words to the emotions that are going through, not just, again, yourselves, but your children. I would say a big thing like this is not giving false hope to a child, especially if you yourself haven't had a sense of where things are at, and maybe you're still yourself deciding on if you're going to continue on with treatment or not. But understanding that just giving that, again, validation to a child to say, like, it must be so hard to not know what our family is going to look like in the future. And, I'm here for you right now to just give you a hug and know that you're loved and cared for, and reiterating the present is a really big, again, mindful practice to kind of navigate through those complex emotions, both adult and child.
Thank you. Here we have a question. Are you able to expand on what is the expanding funding from the government for fertility programs?
Yes. So I will say, I don't know if this person is in Ontario or in another province. So I will just say that across Canada, this is a provincial direct kind of decision. So there are some provinces in our country that unfortunately are not providing these programs. Alberta is an example where they have not yet rolled out a program where government funding for IVF or treatment has yet been granted. BC has very much recently just understood the impact and have now allocated funds and grant money for patients going through different types of treatment. And Ontario has lately, I would just say, upped the government funding program, which is unbelievable for those who are in this province. What that includes is a treatment allocation for IVF. So 1 round of IVF if you are 43 and under. And that could mean either doing an egg retrieval, embryo creation, and transfers. It could also be something that is transferred through egg donor, embryo creation, and transfer. It could be with someone going and carrying the pregnancy themselves, or it could also be through using a surrogate. And again, this is where it has definitely changed lives in terms of the financial impact. That said, this only is for one IVF cycle. So that's where Fertility Friends Foundation and other grants that are focused on, again, like being able to go and enhance those opportunities for people who might have to wait a long time to have access to those grant monies from the government, especially if the wait lists are long. This can come in super handy to be able to, again, expedite treatment, especially for those who've been waiting years and years to go and start and grow their family.
Thank you. Here we have, can you tell me more about the support groups? How often slash is it always the same people? Is it live, etc.?
So I can't speak to the other support groups that are offered outside of Informed Fertility, but I can speak to the ones that we offer within our private practice, and specifically the secondary infertility support groups. So it is where it is accessible to anyone. You don't have to go and be with a designated clinic. This is where the requirement for this group is that you are not currently pregnant, and that you have a child or other children born previously and are struggling now to conceive again. There is no closed group. It is an open group, meaning that you can come and go if and as you'd like. There is rules to the group in terms of confidentiality and just making sure that there's respect among those participants, but there is no obligation to actually participate vocally. You can just be an observer, and many people are, especially if they've just experienced a very devastating loss. So sometimes people just want to feel like there's a space to just be. Often in the groups that I lead, people will, again, be very much kind of coming and going as they're going through treatment. Sometimes in early pregnancies, they are deciding to come and not participate and wait and see how that pregnancy progresses. If it does, then we have a moving on group, meaning that we have a group for those who have injured secondary infertility and now are pregnant but are having some lingering kind of emotions related to, again, is this going to last? Is the shoe going to fall type of thing? And then we have our primary group, which again is for anyone who is going through infertility without having a child. And those are, again, of the same model where you don't have to participate, and it's more, again, available through Zoom. So all of our groups are Zoom accessible. They're free of charge. And again, this is where it's just allowing for a space to talk in a safe way through some of the very deep emotions that are impacting, again, not just fertility, but also impacting day-to-day life, lifestyle, because of the impact that infertility can have. Oh, I didn't know if Emily's
There we
any more.
go.
There we go. Okay, you're back.
That. did I cut out or what happened?
Yeah, you cut out. So I don't know if I
Apologies
cut
for
out
that.
too, but hopefully that that question was answered.
All right, thank you so much. I'm sorry about any technical issues. We do have another question here, which is my partner and I sometimes deal with stress differently. How can we support each other without causing more tension?
Yeah, I would say I do a lot of work with couples too, because while I would say this could be a shared experience, as in you're both experiencing the struggle of infertility, it can often be a very isolating experience, even amongst the relationship, because um, often the person who's carrying the pregnancy or going through the most amount of treatment has a different physical experience than the one who isn't. And so as a result of that, tensions can build and there could be expectations that aren't fulfilled. And also, again, just feeling unheard. So a lot of what I end up speaking about with couples first and foremost is being able to, again, identify the need and then communicate that effectively to partners. So it could just be a lot of the times the non-caring partner feels like they're wanting to fix the situation, and often there isn't a fix. It's more about validation. So this is where leaning in, the same way that I had talked about, the finger trap, leaning in, validating the emotions. Sometimes it's just about feeling like your partner is present with you in the hard, and being able to communicate that, again, the expectation is not that a partner is going to fix anything, but that you're in this together. A lot of the times I would say to couples is using time that's designated. So like proactively planning in the schedule when you're going to have discussions about the journey or about feelings or about next steps. Doing this late at night or doing this on a daily basis could be overwhelming, and it could feel like the burnout is kicking in really hard. Having scheduled discussions with time limits could really allow for there to be conversations that come up in a way that are meaningful, are feeling validated, and where it actually brings more connection versus distance. So I think in this case, using some pre-planned opportunities to have these discussions, setting some time limits around it, and knowing what the need is that you're asking for, that will allow, again, hopefully to have less tension in this and much more, again, togetherness.
Thank you for that response. We have another question here, which is, we are about to start our IVF journey. Are there common feelings that parents experience after IVF that you think people do not talk about enough?
Yeah, I mean, so it could, similar to what I had, described in that earlier slide, just about like the impacts that infertility could have. If you think about all the different areas of your life that it could touch, it's touching relationships, it's touching work, it's touching parenting, it's touching social interactions, body image, like it can have an impact on everything. I think the biggest thing in terms of, what to expect is getting well informed. So whether that's being well informed by your medical team, having an opportunity to almost have like a dress rehearsal before with them about the what to expect before, during, and after, that can help to mitigate some of those anxieties. I would say knowing when those wait times are present can also be really helpful so that you could plan for some buffers. So sometimes it could be buffers with connecting with friends or family. Sometimes it could be buffers where you're doing activities with your child and really having meaningful moments that could really bring you some joy in between the hard. Um, Knowing information about what the cycle will entail in advance can really give you a sense of feeling like you're in the driver's seat and you're in control versus, again, making it feel like you're not in control of not only the infertility journey, but about treatment and about what's to come in the future.
Thank you. And we have one question here, which is, what would you suggest to a couple that suffered an early loss and gone through multiple unsuccessful IUI treatments and a funded IVF cycle that had issues with our fertility clinic? We are getting older and are stuck between grief and finding ourselves and whether or not we want to keep trying.
Yeah. So a lot of what we talk about in the secondary infertility group too, because everyone is coming from different journeys that led them to that time and space, is when is it time to consider moving on and weighing out the benefits versus the emotional and financial and physical risks of continuing onward. So I'm back to, again, like getting well informed about what those options are. And sometimes it's really having some self-reflections over like what is and are there any limits to how much longer you're going to go forward. This could be a very, very, very painful step to take. And it could also be a very brave step to take because most people, for lots of different reasons, do find that they are pivoting from the journey of infertility into the journey of moving onward. And knowing what that could look like, knowing when and how much longer, setting limits is not a bad thing. Setting limits for yourself is an important factor in being able to know that there is life outside of this season of your life. So I would say as a rule of thumb, knowing what your own limitations and boundaries might be, knowing what your spouse's, if you have a spouse, limitations and boundaries might be, having that discussion together. And then if you are nearing that junction point, understanding that there are supports to help process what moving on can look like too, knowing that there's grief that's going to be coming with you. But just like in life, where there is pathways where grief and pain are present, no matter what pathway is also going to be including joy and beautiful connecting moments. So either continuing onward with fertility treatments to grow your family further will include both the joys, hopefully, and the pains, but it's the same way with moving on will include pain as well as joy.
Thank you so much for that. And that is all the time we have for the questions today. If you're in the chat and we didn't have a chance to get to your questions or you're still thinking of them, please write them down and send them along to us after this session, and we will try our best to connect you with Blair or answer your questions in any way possible. Blair, thank you so much for such a meaningful talk today. I just want to share with you here, we have someone in the chat that just says, thank you so much for the validation. So it's clear this is a very important topic, and thank you so much for your time today. And thank you everyone for coming on, and thank you for leaving your questions in the chat. It's always great to be able to have a live conversation and answer your questions as they come. So thank you so much to everyone for joining. I'd like to remind everyone that there'll be a recording sent out shortly, as well as other helpful resources to find the Fertility Friends Foundation and to learn more. We also have Blair's information that we'll be sharing with you as well. And just as you leave the webinar, there's going to be a quick survey that pops up where you have the opportunity to leave us, as well as Blair, some any feedback, and we would really appreciate it. So thank you for that. Blair, thank you so much again, and we will see everyone next month for our next Kidco Talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, everyone, for your participation today and for your excellent questions.